I was reborn on the day I adopted that ungrateful daughter. After my husband disappeared, my mother-in-law schemed to bring his illegitimate daughter home for me to adopt. Persuaded by my mother-in-law, I adopted her despite her congenital disabilities. Not only did I spend a fortune on her treatment and future plans, but I also left all my property to her. Unexpectedly, after she inherited the property, she turned around and bit the hand that fed her. Blaming me for tearing their family apart, in order to seek justice for her biological mother, she forced me to kneel and apologize, and even hired someone to stage a car accident, causing me to be crushed to death by a large truck. In this life, I choose to stand by and watch coldly, letting them all be exposed under the law. What surprised me even more was that the ungrateful daughter from my previous life had also been reborn. 1. I am an orphan, so I have to rely on myself for everything. Through my own efforts, I started a company and barely managed to live a wealthy life. Later, I married my husband, Jace Jiang, who comes from a rural single-parent family. After we got married, both he and his mother moved into my city apartment. Many people say he is just a freeloader, but considering how considerate and caring he is toward me, always putting me first, I haven't made a big deal out of it. We had only been married for 2 years when he suddenly disappeared. I searched for him for days without any success, but my mother-in-law advised me to give up. My mother-in-law, Lucy Ju, treated me very well, which made me feel a sense of motherly love and belonging. After her repeated persuasion and comfort, I eventually gave up on continuing to search for my husband. However, I grew to respect and love her even more, often buying her nice things to show my filial piety. It wasn't until before I died that I realized everything had been orchestrated by them all along. There was no such thing as a good mother-in-law. She was merely adding fuel to the fire and luring me into the trap. My husband pretended to disappear just to fool around with another woman. My mother-in-law knew everything but always covered for them, even scheming to place their illegitimate daughter, born with a cleft lip and palate, under my name, persuaded by my mother-in-law. And upon learning that Zara Jiang was an orphan like me, I softened and took her in as my own, providing her with medical treatment. It wasn't until my adopted daughter inherited my company and returned home with me that I realized everything had been a scam. I watched as my long-lost husband held another woman's hand, sitting on the leather sofa in my home. My daughter affectionately stepped forward, linked her other arm, and sweetly called out, "Mom," and that woman smiled back at her. Seeing the similar faces of the two in front of me, I felt a chill run through my entire body. I rushed forward frantically, loudly questioning Zara Jiang, but my daughter pushed me hard and then said, "If it weren't for you, my parents wouldn't have had to live under assumed names and suffer outside. You vicious woman. Breaking up someone else's family. You really deserve to die." Then, she even had someone force me to kneel and apologize to her biological mother. The woman, however, sat on the sofa, picked up her teacup, took a light sip, and with a look of satisfaction and disdain in her eyes, said, "There's no need to kneel. In fact, I should thank you for helping raise such an outstanding and well-behaved daughter." It was only then that I learned that Zara Jiang was the daughter Jace Jiang had with El Chen in the village before marrying me, and this daughter, whom I had worked so hard to raise, actually made me kneel and apologize to them. I was devastated. I broke free from the restraints and wanted to step forward to confront her, but Jace Jiang took a stride to block her, pushed me hard, and looked at me with a disgusted and wary expression. "After all these years, you're still so domineering and jealous, not at all gentle and considerate like Elle." In the end, during the struggle with them, I was outnumbered and eventually got tied up, beaten, and thrown out of the villa. I wandered the streets in despair, but unexpectedly, a large truck came speeding toward me and ran over my legs. The driver fled the scene, and as I didn't receive timely treatment, I ended up dying miserably on the street. Everything is so absurd. The child I raised with my own hands always regarded me as the enemy who tore her family apart. Meanwhile, her biological parents, who stood by and did nothing throughout her upbringing, became the people she respected most, enjoying a harmonious family life and the joys of kinship. I am filled with hatred for failing to see through this enormous scheme. I hate myself for being too good to her, which led to all this tragedy. 2. The bone-deep pain before death seemed not to have faded yet, but when I opened my eyes again, I was standing at the door of the old house, wearing clean and tidy clothes. Feeling somewhat dazed, I looked down at my hands. The fingers were smooth and fair, unlike those of a 40 or 50-year-old, as if suddenly realizing something. Tears began to fall. I quickly rummaged through my bag, pulled out my phone, flipped it open, and stared intently at the time on the screen. August 21st, 2003, that's the day, no mistake, I had been reborn. I had been reborn back to the day 3 months after my husband went missing. The first day I met Zara Jiang, the day I decided to adopt her, 3 months ago, my husband Jace Jiang went missing. Just on Valentine's Day back then, he gently told me that he wanted to take me on a trip. I brushed it off because I had too much work at the company, but after that, he completely disappeared. Since then, I have been sending people everywhere to inquire and search for his whereabouts. I made phone calls, sent messages, and even went to the police station, but everything seemed to disappear without a trace. And today, my mother-in-law will bring home a 5-year-old child with a cleft lip, telling me she found the child outside, an orphan with no parents, and took pity on her. So she brought her home. She even earnestly tried to persuade me to adopt this poor child. In my previous life, Zara Jiang was especially affectionate toward me from the moment we met, saying, "Auntie, food, hungry." There is a very obvious cleft on her lip, like a split canyon, and the surrounding area is swollen and red, looking quite strange, but her pair of large, watery eyes stared straight at me, and these eyes reminded me of a friend I had in the orphanage during my childhood. For a moment, my heart softened, and I decided to adopt her as my own daughter. I knew it was a congenital physical defect, specifically a cleft lip and palate, but I didn't feel the slightest bit of disdain. Not only did I spend a fortune to restore her appearance, but I also carefully educated her, supported her studies, and gave her almost everything I could possibly offer. Let her grow up healthy like a normal child. I was foolish in my past life, but in this one, I won't jump into the same pit again. Not only will I expose their hypocritical masks, but I will also make sure they suffer eternal damnation. Just like in my previous life, as soon as I opened the door and walked in, I saw my mother-in-law coming out of the kitchen with a glass of water, while Zara Jiang was sitting obediently on the sofa watching TV. Seeing me return, my mother-in-law quickly greeted me. You're back." This child was picked up by the roadside. She looked pitiful and was starving, so I brought her home. Just like in my previous life, Zara Jiang ran up to me, took my hand, and said the same thing. I stared at her face, frozen for a few seconds. Before I could say anything, my mother-in-law continued, "Oh, look how well-behaved and pitiful this child is. I asked her earlier, and she said she has no parents. She must have been abandoned, since you and Ah Chong don't have any children, and I really like her. Why don't you just adopt her as your daughter? Consider it an act of kindness and virtue." Hearing this, I immediately pulled my hand away from the child and said, "Mom, we don't know where this child came from. I think it's better to take her to the police station. The police will arrange for her care. Our family isn't running a charity. This isn't appropriate." Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law immediately became displeased. One cannot be so heartless. If this child is sent to an orphanage, she will surely suffer even more. You yourself came from an orphanage. Please have some pity on this child. Mom, what you're doing amounts to kidnapping. We should hand her over to the police station." I made a move to call the police, but my mother-in-law quickly stopped me and tried to persuade me again, though she kept repeating the same lines about pity and such. In the end, I still didn't agree to adopt her. I bluntly said, "Mom, since you like this child so much, and your son is missing anyway, why don't you adopt her in your name? I wouldn't mind having a younger sister-in-law." Lucy Jew's mother-in-law twitched the corner of her mouth upon hearing this. Utterly confused by what was going on, this was her own granddaughter. What would it look like if she were to adopt her as a daughter? Meanwhile, Jiang Huishue, hearing our argument, had tears welling up in her eyes. She cried out to her grandmother, "Grandma, I'm hungry." In the end, her grandmother couldn't bear to be harsh. With deep pity, she pulled the child into her arms and began to sob, murmuring, "Poor thing, oh, poor thing." I had no intention of continuing to pay attention to her. So I turned around and went upstairs to my room. Only after my inner emotions had calmed down a bit did I start thinking about the next step. Right now, the company is in a critical growth phase these past few weeks, and I really don't have time to investigate Jace Jiang and El Chen. I'm afraid it will have to wait. Let them be pleased for a while. 3. Zara Jiang ultimately stayed in this family, seeing that she couldn't persuade me. My mother-in-law eventually adopted her herself, registering a mother-daughter relationship on the household register, but to outsiders. She claimed the child was from her daughter who had married far away and passed away, and she changed the child's name to Ju Huishua. Watching all this, I could only feel a sense of irony. When Jace Jiang returns and sees that his daughter has become his sister, I wonder what he will think. Ju Huishua, a child of about 5 years old, was still naive and unable to do anything on her own. Especially with her cleft lip, she couldn't close her mouth properly while eating, making it extremely difficult for her to eat anything. In my previous life, I personally fed her with a spoon at every meal, bite by bite, and without any disgust, I wiped away the food residue she spat out. Only after she finished eating would I start my own meal, by which time the food had already turned cold. At that time, my mother-in-law just stood by and watched, doing nothing. But she knew how to say nice words, without lifting a finger. She managed to portray herself as a kind and caring mother. This time, however, I paid no attention. During the meal, I kept my eyes fixed on my own bowl and ate without looking around. With no one to help her, Ju Huishua picked up a spoon and tried to shovel food into her mouth. But she ended up spitting out half of what she ate. Looking utterly disheveled, seeing Ju Huishua making a mess on the table in front of her while eating and occasionally knocking over her rice bowl, my mother-in-law said to me with some annoyance, "Why don't you feed Xiaoxua? Look at the state she's in." I smiled. Whoever adopted her should take care of her. Mom, you're her real mother now. Besides, I have to go to the company for a meeting right after I finish eating, so I really don't have the time. Since you're free at home, why don't you feed her? Ju Huishua started babbling and was about to cry, saying to my mother-in-law, "Meat, I want meat, I'm hungry." Although my mother-in-law was extremely reluctant, she ultimately continued to feed her. Sure enough, after I learned to let go of everything and be a hands-off manager, life became much more relaxed and pleasant, and Ju Huishua almost needed to be fed at every meal, and she was like a starving ghost reincarnated, calling out that she was hungry and needed to eat every hour or two, and every time she ate, because of her cleft lip, she couldn't keep the food in her mouth, and it would spill out, making a mess on her body and the table. Even though my mother-in-law was very patient, she couldn't help but feel a lot of resentment after going through this day after day. Her gaze toward the child shifted from initial affection to impatience, and along with that, she also harbored more complaints about my indifferent attitude. Seeing that I was often not at home, she seized the opportunity to say, I don't mean to criticize you, but you're always busy at the company every day. Women, being too strong-willed isn't good. Why not stay home and help me take care of Xiaoxua?" I sneered inwardly. "Mom, what are you talking about? If I don't go out to earn money, what would we eat and drink every day? Do you think everything in this house just falls from the sky? Don't worry. Even though Zhong is missing, I will wait for him to come back. Besides, I've always treated you like my own mother, and I will take good care of you in the future." Monkey see, monkey do. Who can't paint a rosy picture? After hearing my words, even though my mother-in-law was filled with resentment, she had no way to deal with me at that moment. She could only watch helplessly as I left early and returned late, while she stayed home alone doing housework and taking care of the children. For, just like that, free from the interference of trivial family matters, my company continued to improve. After this period passed, I began to investigate the matters concerning Jace Jiang and El Chen. Soon, Ju Huishua reached the age to start school. In my previous life, my mother-in-law chose an elementary school for her that was very close to my workplace, claiming it was so that I could conveniently pick up the child after work, build a bond along the way. making it both convenient and effective. Meanwhile, she lived a very relaxed life every day, strolling in the park with elderly aunties, playing cards, dancing, and thoroughly enjoying herself. Back then, I was constantly busy, rushing to school as soon as I got off work, then hurrying home to cook, and even having to find time on weekends to take the child to the hospital for rehabilitation therapy. Occasionally, due to work-related matters, when I pick her up late, I still see my daughter's somewhat tearful eyes as she complains of hunger. When I get home, my mother-in-law will also criticize me, both directly and indirectly, saying how could I leave the child alone at school for so long? It's so irresponsible. In this lifetime, my mother-in-law remains exactly the same. She still chose that school and tactfully suggested, I see that school is the closest to your company. Oh dear, I'm old and not as useful anymore, and my legs aren't as nimble. How about you pick up and drop off Xiao Shui from school every day, Mom? How do I have that much time? I work overtime every day and really can't manage to pick her up. How about this? Let Xiao Shui attend the elementary school near our neighborhood. It's close to home and much more convenient. Hearing my words, my mother-in-law's face immediately fell. She started holding Xiao Shui again and lamenting, oh dear, Xiao Shui, you have such a hard life. Oh my, if that's the case, maybe it's better not to go to school at all. Even though Xiao Shui looked at me with pleading eyes full of hope, I remained unmoved. I simply tossed out the words, take it or leave it, and turned around to go upstairs. The private investigator I hired soon sent word that he had discovered my mother-in-law had secretly sent nearly 1,000 yuan in installments to someone named L. Chen. Jace Jiang is indeed very clever and has hidden his tracks extremely well, but as long as a person lives in this world, there will always be traces of their life. I'm in no hurry, there's still plenty of time. Once I obtain solid evidence of Jace Jiang's infidelity and fraudulent marriage, I will file for divorce directly and make these vampires lurking in the shadows get out of my home for good. Seeing that I was firm in my stance and had no intention of taking care of Ju Huishue, my mother-in-law found it extremely exhausting to shuttle back and forth herself. In the end, she arranged for Ju Huishue to transfer to a school closer to home. However, she made Ju Huishue, a 6-year-old child, commute to and from school on her own. 5. That day, while I was checking the company's order data, a phone call came in urgently. As soon as I answered, my mother-in-law's anxious voice came through from the other end. Come to Xiaoshua's school quickly, come and stand up for her. She's being bullied at school. Hearing this, I laughed, but since I've been reborn, why would I foolishly help them solve their problems? I gave a perfunctory response, saying I would come as soon as possible after finishing the work at hand. After hanging up, I directly turned off my phone. Then I leisurely checked the orders, and even took advantage of the free time to go out and buy a cup of coffee. It wasn't until after 9 in the evening that I leisurely made my way back home. As soon as I opened the door, I could feel my mother-in-law's barely concealed venomous glare. Linyu, why didn't you answer my calls? Do you have any idea that today, this was the first time I had ever seen Lucy Ju lose her temper? The ferocity in her tone and the shrillness of her voice almost made me think she was going to tear me apart. I pretended to look a bit wronged and asked, Mom, you just got back and you're already blaming me. My phone ran out of battery and shut down today, so I didn't hear it. Besides, I was swamped with urgent work and couldn't get away. I rushed back as soon as I got off work, and I haven't even eaten yet. What's going on with you? When my mother-in-law heard the trembling in my voice, she finally calmed down and realized she had overreacted. She quickly added, please don't blame me, I was just too worked up earlier. It's just that Xiao Shui was bullied at school, and those people even demanded an apology with compensation. I was hoping you could help us seek justice. Bullying Xiao Shui. And they want you to apologize and pay. What kind of classmates are these? I'll call teacher Xiong right now to ask about it. Seeing that I was about to make the call, my mother-in-law immediately panicked. Wait, I've been thinking it over, and it's better not to escalate the matter. How will Xiao Shui continue studying at school if this gets out of hand? How about this? Just transfer me 5,000 yuan, and I'll handle it myself. I sneered coldly. So, she just wanted to ask for money. Over the past few months, I haven't been transferring money to her like I used to. Upon careful thought, it's either that the money I gave before has run out, or Jace Jiang is pressing for payment, which is why she's shamelessly asking me for money. I pretended to be in a difficult position and said, "Well, Mom, the company has been having some cash flow issues lately, and I can't come up with that much money right now. I'll transfer it to you in a while." Seeing my response, she said a few more nice things, but eventually realized that no matter what she said, I wouldn't budge on giving her the money. My mother-in-law's face immediately fell, and she stopped talking to me out of spite. As for me, I couldn't ask for more, but the matter still blew up. Within a couple of days, people showed up outside my company holding banners, accusing me, the owner of such a large company, of neglecting my daughter's situation and refusing to pay the medical expenses. People around immediately started discussing it, quickly drawing a crowd that stopped to point and stare at the company. When my secretary informed me about the situation, I rubbed my temples and headed to the company entrance. As soon as I stepped out, the group of people scrutinized me carefully, as if confirming something. Then a father became somewhat agitated, rushed forward wanting to confront me, and pointing at my nose, he angrily scolded, "How did you raise your daughter? Such a young child actually did such a malicious thing." 6*. I smiled and said, "Sir, I think you've got the wrong person. I don't have a daughter." The person was stunned by my words and asked in confusion, "Isn't Ju Huishua your daughter? Your mother-in-law told us yesterday that if there were any issues, we should come to you. How could you, as a mother, be so heartless, to shirk responsibility? You're even unwilling to acknowledge your own daughter. With such poor character, no wonder you gave birth to a child with defects. Anyway, you must compensate me for the medical expenses." I'll say it again. Ju Huishua is not my daughter. She is my mother-in-law's daughter. Legally, I have no obligation to take responsibility for her matters. Hearing me say this, the group of people started wailing and rolling on the ground again, throwing a tantrum. Heaven won't tolerate this. Oh dear, everyone, come and help me seek justice. This family's child pushed my child down the stairs, causing my child's leg to break. They're still lying in the hospital. And now the mother is shirking responsibility. I was getting quite irritated by this group of people, so I simply warned them, "If you keep causing trouble, I'm going to call the police." I've already made myself very clear. Hearing that I was going to call the police, the man became even more aggressive. "Go ahead and call. No matter what, you're the one in the wrong. It was your daughter who caused my child's fracture." In the end, such troublesome matters still had to be resolved by the police. And only then was the situation fully clarified. When the truth came out, the father was utterly shocked. Ju Huishua really wasn't my daughter. And Ju Huishua and Lucy Ju are actually mother and daughter. It's somewhat hard to believe, considering that just a few days ago the child was calling her grandma, and now she's turned out to be her biological mother. That person's face immediately darkened, both annoyed and angry, muttering, "Even so, isn't Ju Huishua still your sister-in-law? You're such a wealthy boss. What's the big deal about helping to cover some medical expenses?" Just as I was arguing with this person, my mother-in-law hurriedly arrived with Ju Huishua from home. Seeing the scene, she timidly spoke up, "Officer, is there something you need from me? I'm a law-abiding citizen. I haven't done anything wrong." The officer got straight to the point. "Ms. Ju, this gentleman is suing your daughter for pushing a classmate down the stairs and demanding you compensate 3,000 yuan in medical expenses." Upon hearing the amount of 3,000 yuan, my mother-in-law was momentarily stunned. But she didn't dare to cause a scene at the police station. Instead, she tightly grabbed my arm, turned her gaze toward me, her eyes full of signals urging me to quickly pay up to settle the matter. But I was frustrated. "Oh, mother-in-law, didn't I tell you the other day that I really don't have that much money on hand right now? Besides, you still have some savings, don't you? Why not use that to handle the emergency first?" Seeing that I refused to pay, but with the police pressing urgently, my mother-in-law ultimately ended up paying 1,500 yuan out of her own pocket. As she handed over the money, I could clearly see the somewhat distorted expression on her face. The reason for cutting it in half was because my mother-in-law argued forcefully, saying that it was their child who first mocked Xiaoxue, calling her an ugly freak with a cleft lip, and that Xiaoxue was being bullied at school. Just after leaving the police station, Zhu Huixue clung to me tightly and cried, "Woo-woo, auntie. I don't want this, woo-woo." What she was referring to was her own cleft lip. I forcefully pried her hands away from me, my voice cold but my face smiling. "Xiaoxue, in this world, you can't always have what you want or get rid of what you don't." She listened to my words, a trace of confusion in her eyes, but eventually lowered her head again. 7. Soon, the spring festival was approaching, and the amount of information I had in my hands was growing, including their current addresses, identities, and occupations. Moreover, the investigators even uncovered some things I didn't know. The two were actually middle school classmates and had a passionate campus romance back then. 7 years ago, Elle Chen became pregnant, but at that time, her mother-in-law Lucy Zhu looked down on Elle Chen and firmly opposed their marriage, even taking her son to move to the city. Elle Chen gave birth to the child alone, but discovered the baby was born with a cleft lip. She brought the child to the city to find the mother and son, but in the end, they all looked down on this little girl. After much deliberation, they chose to abandon her directly at the doorstep of an orphanage. They had planned to get married later, but they had no capital at all, which is why they turned their attention to me, the one who worked hard to establish the company. After learning all of this, many fragments flashed through my mind, especially every moment of getting to know Jace Jiang, which passed through my thoughts like falling meteors. Jace Jiang appeared honest and dependable, but who would have thought he would actually try to deceive me with a sham marriage? In the end, he even went missing, hiding away and using my money to enjoy himself with another woman. The thought of me working so hard, giving it my all, only to have all the money go towards supporting this entire family, and ending up in such a miserable state. No matter what, I can't swallow this anger. In this lifetime, I will live for myself, no matter what it takes. All that's left now is a paternity test report for Zhu Huixue, Jace Jiang, and Elle Chen, and then we can send this whole family off together to work the sewing machines. Zhu Huixue's hair is easy to obtain, but getting samples from the other two will really require some clever methods. In the days leading up to the new year, I deliberately told my mother-in-law that I had to go on a business trip out of town and wouldn't be able to join them for the New Year's Eve dinner. I mentioned that the earliest I could return would be around the 5th day of the Lunar New Year. I showed her the train ticket I had bought and pretended to feel a bit guilty as I handed her 6,000 yuan. She immediately took it and said with some regret, "Xiaoyu, remember to eat well while you're away and don't work too hard." Just as I expected, she hadn't seen her son for over half a year, especially during a time like the Spring Festival, so she was bound to go look for the two of them. This was also the moment I confronted them and obtained crucial evidence. I rented the apartment across from theirs and moved in. To my surprise, early on New Year's Eve morning, the two of them became even bolder, carrying large and small bags, and came directly to my home, standing outside the curtains. I watched the busy figures in the opposite kitchen and smiled ironically. By around 7 in the evening, I carried my suitcase and headed home. I unlocked the door directly with my key and happily called out, "Mom, I'm back." The people inside were sitting around the table eating together, looking very harmonious. Elle Chen was even personally feeding Zhu Huixue. But upon hearing my voice, the happy smiles on their faces instantly froze. It seemed none of them expected me to return so suddenly at this moment, and they all stood up. Lucy Zhu was the one who panicked. She walked over to me, her voice trembling. "Ayu, didn't you say you wouldn't be back until the 5th of the month?" 8. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked over to Jace Jiang and immediately threw myself into his arms, crying, "Husband, do you know how long I've been looking for you? Where on earth have you been?" While crying, I reached out and yanked his hair hard. Jace Jiang seemed not to expect me to be so emotional. Even though his scalp was hurting at the moment, he couldn't say anything about it. He could only stiffly return my hug and awkwardly add, "Honey, where I went isn't important. The important thing is I'm back now, isn't it?" Elle Chen, who was standing nearby, watched our interaction, a flicker of jealousy crossing her face, but at that moment, There was nothing she could do. A bit puzzled, I looked at her and asked, "And you are?" Just as El Chen was about to say something, my mother-in-law interjected, "Xiao Yu, she's the daughter of my distant cousin. My poor cousin passed away, and since it's the spring festival, I thought she might be lonely all by herself. So I invited her over. I hope you don't mind." El Chen rolled her eyes and said, "Yeah, sis, it's just for the festive atmosphere of the new year. That's why we came to Mom's place." I then let out an "oh" and took the initiative to hold El Chen's hand, saying, "The new year should be lively." The moment I saw you, I felt a sense of familiarity. As I spoke, I pretended to think for a moment, then suddenly turned to look at Ju Huishue, who was sitting next to El Chen, as if I had just thought of something. "If you hadn't mentioned it, I would have thought you were Huishue's mother. You two look so much alike." Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but feel a bit flustered, especially my husband, Jace Jiang, who quickly interjected, "There are plenty of people in the world who look alike. You, with your overactive imagination, always jump to conclusions." When my mother-in-law saw this, she quickly changed the subject. "Oh, Xiao Yu, you came back without even telling me. We're almost finished eating." "Well, I just wanted to surprise you all, but now it's quite a surprise indeed, honey. You're really something. Disappearing for so long without contacting the family. You have no idea how worried Mom and I have been, almost going crazy. I tried my best to play the role of a wife missing her husband, but listening to all these lies and watching the performance of these people truly made me sick." Jace Jiang said that on Valentine's Day, he had intended to go to the mall to pick out a gift for me, but he was drugged on the way and taken directly to a remote mountain area. He doesn't remember how he got through those few months, but luckily, he managed to escape recently. If I hadn't been reborn, I probably would have been fooled by his smooth talk. He vividly described his personal experience that day, even mentioning small details like the kidnapper using his left hand to light a cigarette after getting in the car, just like Ju Huishue beside him, who was listening to Jace Jiang's story with great curiosity. However, as long as you approach the problem from the perspective that he is lying, you will find the logical flaws. He initially said he was drugged unconscious and woke up in the mountains, so how could he have observed the small actions of the kidnapper? I can only say, I've hung myself on the southeast branch. 9. The plan went very smoothly, and I successfully obtained hair from both of them. A new year has begun, and I am about to be reborn, and so El Chen naturally moved into my home. I didn't make a big deal of it, but when the neighbors asked, I just said she was my husband's distant cousin. I told this to the most gossipy Aunt Wang in the neighborhood, and within less than a day, some of the gossipy aunties started looking a bit suspicious. Plus, since Ju Huishue and El Chen do bear some resemblance, they jumped to the conclusion that the two were related, even directly suspecting that Ju Huishue was my husband and El Chen's daughter. But I pretended to be wronged and said, "Aunties, please don't say things like that. I trust my husband. There's nothing between them." As soon as I said that, many of the aunties became even more eager to persuade me. In no time, almost all the elderly folks in the neighborhood knew that Jace Jiang had returned, and that he had brought along a distant cousin named El Chen. I even specially prepared an expensive set of cosmetics as a gift for El Chen. When I handed it to her, the surprise in her eyes was completely unmistakable. Ju Huishue truly is El Chen's biological mother. Their relationship at home has grown increasingly close. She often takes her out to play and occasionally goes to eat burgers, spending the money I earn and living in my house. They're living quite comfortably. But soon, the good days for all of you will come to an end. The day I received the paternity test results at the hospital, I went home, packed my things, and moved out. Shortly after, I formally filed for divorce with the local court. I heard from those people again several days later. Early in the morning, Jace Jiang called, his voice filled with doubt and anger. "Lin Yu, what are you doing? Why did I receive a court summons, and I have to prepare for court in 10 days? What are you causing trouble for now? Also, did you take the 50,000 yuan from the bedroom?" I only replied, "I don't want to have any communication with you. Save whatever you have to say for the courtroom." After saying that, I immediately hung up the phone. Of course, during this time, I absolutely would not let them find me, Because of this matter, I directly extended the Spring Festival holiday for all company employees by 1 month. Everyone was very happy. And this also prevented Jace Jiang from causing trouble at my company, and so, I leisurely enjoyed myself outside for 10 days. Although the internet wasn't as developed as it would be in the future, entertainment for the wealthy had its own unique charm. 10. When we met again, the whole family had come. As soon as I arrived at the courthouse entrance, I saw several people sitting by the door, looking around. The moment they spotted me, they aggressively rushed over to confront me with questions. I'm not foolish either. Not only did I hire the best divorce lawyer in the city, but I also brought several bodyguards to escort me all the way, just in case the family tried to get physical with me. Jace Jiang, seeing that the tough approach wasn't working, softened his fierce expression and said, "Honey, why are you suddenly talking about divorce, and you even sued me in court? Isn't this just making a fool of ourselves in front of others?" His mother, standing nearby, chimed in, "That's right, Xiaoyu, why are you going to such extremes? These past few days, the gossip from the aunties has been enough to drown me. Indeed, to make sure they would definitely come back, I had someone spread the news of my divorce lawsuit to the people in the neighborhood. I suppose by now, everyone in the community has gotten to know this man who was sued by his wife. You know exactly what you've done. You should be the ones who understand best why I'm filing for divorce." As I spoke, I walked into the courthouse, and the others quickly followed, and when I truthfully presented all the evidence I had gathered over the past 6 months along with the full situation, that family completely lost their composure. I stood firm, demanding a divorce and insisting that Jace Jiang leave with nothing. The judge also found my request to be very reasonable. Since we got married, I've been the one working hard all along. I originally arranged a small position for Jace Jiang, but he complained the job was too tiring and ended up just staying at home doing nothing. I presented evidence that he intentionally went missing for several months while I was desperately searching for him, and all along he was secretly fooling around with El Chen behind my back. After I caught them, they shamelessly claimed to be cousins and even moved into my house. I also called several witnesses from our neighborhood to testify. Finally, I submitted the paternity test reports for Jace Jiang, El Chen, and Zhu Huishue. Combined with my lawyer's eloquent arguments, the judge sternly asked, "Defendant, do you have anything to explain?" Faced with overwhelming evidence, they couldn't provide any substantial proof and could only play the emotional card. "Honey, how could you think of me like this? My feelings for you are real. You have to believe me." I refused to answer. My mother-in-law also pleaded earnestly, "Xiaoyu, as a woman, who would want you after a divorce, even if some of it is Jace Jiang's fault? Don't be so extreme. Okay, just endure it and it will pass. Who hasn't gone through this?" I didn't listen at all. Later, Jace Jiang outright became unreasonable. Anyway, I absolutely refused to agree to a divorce. "As long as I don't agree, you can't get rid of me," the judge asked again. But the defendant still had nothing to say. In the end, the one-sided exchange concluded, and the judge announced that the verdict would be issued in 3 days. I packed my things and prepared to leave the courthouse. However, I was stopped at the door by Zhu Huishue. The look in her eyes was nothing like that of a child. As soon as she saw me, she said firmly, "My dear mother, have you been reborn too?" 11. I saw her sinister gaze, and in that instant, it overlapped with the her from my previous life. Soon, I let it go. In this life, she is just a child, and most importantly, she is still just a child with a facial defect. Without me, who in that family would pay for her treatment, she can only live the life that was originally meant for her, stuck with that appearance. So I laughed and said, "Little friend, I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't call out to people randomly." She was somewhat annoyed. "Was it you who schemed to have grandma adopt me?" Zhu Huishue was feeling a bit of a headache at this moment. She had memories from her past life, but discovered that her identity had changed, and it was quite awkward. She and her biological parents had directly become siblings. Moreover, her cleft lip hadn't been treated yet. In her previous life, by this time, she had long since recovered and was just like a normal person. Upon hearing that several people were at the courthouse, I rushed over in a hurry. I glanced at her. then at the family members who were about to follow her out, and prepared to quickly leave the scene. Seeing my hurried steps, Jace Jiang shouted unwillingly, "Lin Yu, I won't let you succeed." I smiled and said, "Whatever you say now is useless, just wait to leave with nothing and return to your original life." Before the day the results were announced, someone couldn't hold back anymore, completely losing control, and called to say, "Lin Yu, I must have misjudged you, you wretched woman. How dare you scheme against me like this? I'm going to fight you to the death." Jace Jiang's previous honest demeanor had completely vanished, replaced by furious curses over the phone. Seeing that I remained calm, he said, "Don't think I don't know you've been reborn. Xiaoxue told me everything." Meanwhile, Zhu Huaixue hurried over to stop him, saying, "Dad, don't rush. We can't afford to be hasty right now. There must be a way." Zhu Huaixue's words were very effective. In the end, Jace Jiang only warned me to withdraw the lawsuit quickly, or else he would make me regret it. I laughed. "Then let's wait and see." Zhu Huaixue forgot that I have always been a ruthless character. It was only because I regarded her as family in my previous life that I let my guard down completely, which ultimately led to such an outcome. Actually, when she ordered someone to make me kneel to El Chen, while I was heartbroken, what I thought in my heart was that I must take revenge. I just didn't expect that at the moment of my emotional breakdown, I would die directly on the road. Similarly, while crossing the street this afternoon, I realized that the truck in my previous life was not an accident but a deliberate murder. If it weren't for the bodyguards I hired in this life who have been following me almost inseparably these past few days, I would have been directly hit and killed by a large truck. The bodyguard pulled me back just in time, with only a few seconds to spare, and when that large truck saw me dodge, it turned the steering wheel to continue chasing me, but ended up crashing directly into a utility pole by the roadside. In trying to harm others, they ended up harming themselves. Soon, the police arrived to handle the situation, and I explained my circumstances and suspicions to them. Without an investigation, you wouldn't know. Once they looked into it, it was truly shocking. The driver turned out to be a cousin of El Chen. It turns out they were directly after my life, which completely unravels all their schemes. In that case, I won't let them off easy either. 3 days passed quickly, and I received the final judgment from the court. The divorce was a done deal. As for the division of property, the court ruled that all assets before the marriage would remain with each spouse, but all assets acquired after the marriage would belong entirely to the wife. I was quite satisfied with this outcome. After all, I didn't ask for any bride price, but I had given a considerable dowry. Now, Jace Jiang still owes me 100,000. Naturally, they were not convinced, but it was of no use. Moreover, I brought them back to court again on charges of intentional assault. As for El Chen's cousin, under the police's coercion and persuasion, he revealed the details of hiring those individuals. This time, El Chen and Jace Jiang directly secured several years of stable meals from the Public Security Bureau. 12. I sold the original house directly. With money in hand, I was ready to develop my career in another city, and many employees from the company were willing to follow me. As early as over half a year ago, I had already informed many senior employees in the company about the relocation plan. My previous business trips were all related to handling these matters. Now, I just want to stay away from all of this and live the happy life that belongs to me. I heard about Zhu Huaixue again from a former colleague of the company. She said that Zhu Huaixue and her mother or grandmother still live in their neighborhood, wearing a mask, an 8-year-old girl who is incredibly arrogant, always wanting this and that, and even forcing Lucy Zhu to buy her a 1,000 yuan phone. Her academic performance at school is indeed decent, but she shows great disrespect toward her teachers. Not only does she often speak rudely in class and bully her classmates, but she also enjoys skipping school to go to internet cafes and forming cliques with older boys. She claimed she could make money online, but in the end, not only did she fail to earn anything, she was also scammed out of over 2,000 yuan. A colleague also said that later, Zhu Huaixue went around asking about my whereabouts, but no one was willing to tell her where I was. And because of the incident where she was scammed out of a few thousand yuan, Lucy Zhu flew into a rage. Not only did she cut off her allowance, but she also kept a close watch on her to prevent her from running around. It is said that recently, the rebellious girl, taking advantage of Lucy Jew's inattention, directly followed a young man in his 20s with a tiger tattoo on his arm, who claimed he would take her south to make a fortune. As if to prove herself, she took all the money from the house and all of Lucy Jew's jewelry, which infuriated Lucy Jew so much that she immediately called the police, determined to bring the little girl back no matter what. I just smiled as I listened, thinking about how well I had treated her in my previous life, almost giving her everything I had, which ultimately ended up spoiling her completely. In this life, I doubt she can cause much of a stir, after all. I recently saw posters outside and in newspapers about human traffickers and social youths abducting female students to remote mountain villages, along with wanted notices, and that person seemed to be from the same city, with a tiger tattooed on his arm.